So can you imagine as a kid, I'm in the Boy Scouts, and then I go to my after-school program, and then maybe I go swimming at the pool at the JCC. I'm hearing the same thing over and over again. And I'm sure you know the old advertising adage is that people don't remember things until they've heard it 7 times from 7 different sources. So if we continue to say the same things over and over again, maybe we'll get in people's heads, but often we have different messages, and we have to tailor messages to our audiences, but if there's some consistency, then that really helps. And then just lastly on partners, the different partners, again, I was really happy to see both what Frank and Jason talked about, and I wanted to share about a roundtable that Derek came to at the organization I work with now, the Bipartisan Policy Center. The Bipartisan Policy Center was created by 4 former Senate Majority Leaders to really essentially trying to prod Congress of, okay, if we can get Democrat and Republican former elected officials to come up with solutions to problems, maybe Congress will take action. Well, Congress is not doing stuff all that quickly right now, especially in election year. We have 4 former cabinet secretaries, 2 secretaries of agriculture, Veneman and Glickman, and 2 HHS secretaries, Shalala and Levitt. And we have a short-term project that ends in July. It's a 1-year project to come up with policy recommendations for the federal government, state governments, tribal governments, county and city, and the private sector of how to increase nutrition and physical activity. And we're having a series of roundtables. And we had one on physical activity and outdoors and technology. And so we had, Derek was there, and then we had people from it was co-hosted with the President's Council of Fitness, Sport, and Nutrition. And then we had people from sports leagues, we had people from the National Park Service, we had people from the Entertainment Software Alliance, Outdoor Nation, lots of different people for a thoughtful discussion of how we change policies. But what I found around the table, which was so amazing to me, was the regular physical activity people, so the National Association of Physical Activity Educators, I don't even know the whole acronym, and some of the people from the U.S. Tennis Association, some of the people that are traditionally that work on getting kids active, they didn't know any of the outdoor people. And the outdoor people didn't know any of the physical activity people. And so they're both trying to do the same thing, but neither of them had met each other until that meeting. And I was like, oh my God, that is really, I'm new to this. I haven't been doing this that long, and these are people that have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they had never met each other because they had stayed in their silo of either outdoor activity or physical activity. Well, to me, this is a bigger issue, and whatever you're trying to do, we gotta work together, because we are not gonna win of getting more people active and kids active unless we work together. And then the other one was really talking about technology, which was where we had the most electricity in the room. Is yes, kids are spending 7.5 hours in front of a screen, but screens aren't going away. So we can't view screens as the enemy, we gotta use it as our friend. So I kept looking at the brochures that you have, and I kept thinking, oh my God, if there was an app for all of your brochures so that you don't necessarily have to have paper, because I'm not necessarily gonna walk around with paper, but I probably will have my phone. So we had the Entertainment Software Alliance there. We had Hope Labs that creates these accelerometers. I don't know if you've heard of them, where they measure activity. For kids, you can't have a pedometer because kids don't move linearly. They don't move in one line. You have to do an accelerometer because they move in different spaces and outbursts. And so a bunch of us, especially moms in the room, were saying, oh my God, imagine if you could use an accelerometer to measure how much activity your kid has, and then you can reward them if they want to do a video game. Okay, you did your 60 minutes of physical activity, now you can do a video game. And so have it linked that video game doesn't even turn on until you have that 60 minutes of physical activity. So we were brainstorming of how these groups how could you use technology. We had another group, kind of similar to what Jason was doing. Two Bulls is a technology company, and they've created something called the Hidden Park, where it is a video game that you can only play outside. You can't play it inside, you can only play it outside. And anybody can use it now. It's hiddenpark.com, I think. But if you just Google Hidden Park, you can find it. And it's a world of magical trolls and fairies and a fairy ranger, and so you have to go to GPS sites to find the treasures. But so it was developed for a park in Norway, but it's been used by Central Park. Some parks in Australia and New Zealand are using it. Any park can use it as long as some ranger puts in the GPS sites. But what it does is that engages people that kids want to play video games, and it's a 1-hour video game that you have to play outside. And what they've also been finding on video games of incentives, often when I started in this, I thought, okay, we need a partner like Nike or Adidas so that when kids do their 60 minutes of physical activity, they get a soccer ball or they get sneakers. But really what we're finding is that they want virtual things, so it doesn't cost as much. So what I would say, when I was looking at, again, your brochure, my brain was going, as I saw that cute little dog on one of your pictures, is that they want to have avatars. They want to have their own avatar that then they can give that avatar some
sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly. Right, designs. Or they want to be able to get to the next level of a game.
Yeah.
So the more that we can think about, so when you think about fishing, what Frank was talking about, fishing and boating, I keep thinking about, okay, how would it be if Frank sat down with the Entertainment Software Alliance and figuring out maybe there's a game that is about fishing and boating, and then these kids also could create an avatar of themselves fishing or boating, so when they're not actually out on it, they can continue that experience when they're at home. So it's just trying to figure out where are other people and how do we motivate them. I'll tell another story. When I worked for the CDC years ago, when we had an immunization problem, I don't know if you remember in the early 90s, a bunch of kids died of measles, and we were trying to get more kids immunized. And I talked to the health department, and we were trying to go to different places, and the health department said to me, well, we have lots of posters about immunization. I said, okay, so where do you put the posters? And they said, well, other health departments. And I said, well, maybe we should put it somewhere else, because if they're already in the health department, probably they're going to get immunized. So I guess it's just I think for all of us, we need to think out of the box of where do we go with people, and what are some of the places that we can go. And I'll tell my last story of other partnerships is gardens. Frank talked about boating and fishing, about a gateway sport. I would say gardening is also a gateway. And I know that a lot of city parks have community gardens. I don't know what the federal laws are. I'm talking to John Jarvis about this. Could we have more community gardens in national parks? But I would say if there were gardens in every park, and community gardens, that you might be able to get more people to go to those gardens. And when you think about mentors, a great opportunity with kids is seniors. Before I started with Let's Move, I worked on safe routes to school, trying to get more kids to walk and bike to school. And I was a typical type A mom, and we didn't have a sidewalk going to the school for my kids. And I live in Washington, D.C., downtown, not that far. But I live off Connecticut Avenue, and so I heard about safe routes to school. And so I actually applied for a grant. I got a grant, and we got a sidewalk in the area. But the way I got a sidewalk is because I partnered with a bunch of senior groups and senior centers. We have a bunch of retirement homes on Connecticut Avenue. And what we found with the seniors was the seniors were using the crossing guards to go shopping because they were afraid to cross the street by themselves, and they only went across the street when the kids' crossing guards were out. And so they were natural allies. So when we went to the city council trying to get more money, seniors vote. And so it was a lot more from a mom to have a senior next to me asking for that money than just me by myself. So those unusual partnerships helped. And so going back to the gardening is that a lot of seniors like to garden, right? Sometimes, so it's a great avenue. And I'll just tell you the story about the garden in my school. And we started a school garden. And I remember we had the first harvest. And in the harvest, there was a little girl who started eating a radish. And radishes, as you know, are kind of spicy. So I go to this little girl and I say, so do you like that radish? And she looks at me and she puts her hands on her hips. She goes, Miss Robin, I grew that radish. That's my radish, and I'm going to eat that radish. And so this light bulb dawned on me of gardening, but not just gardening, but everything that you do. The more that we empower the kids to be their own advocates for themselves, that we're not just talking down to them, but that we're actually putting it in their own hands. So gardening is a great thing, that they're putting it in their own hands and tasting things that they would never taste on their own. If I gave my kid a radish, they would never try it, but if they grew it, they might try it. So are there other ways, whether it's gardening or something else, that the kids are doing it themselves so they can be their own advocates? So I'll leave it for that so we have some questions. I would just have, I can never leave a room without an ask, and a vision. So my ask is, one is that you all could think about who's a partner you could bring to the table that you've never thought about before, somebody. And then my vision is that if I come to this partnership meeting 1 year from now, is that you have more people from the healthcare industry, that you have people from the Department of Health, that you have people from the video gaming industry, technology industry, that you have other people in the audience that can be your partners that are outside, no pun intended, but of your groups. And I think you could be a leader in trying to solve this obesity epidemic. You have the tools. Often people say, we need a YMCA. It's like, we don't have places to bring the kids. Well, you have the places. You have the assets. And so you have the opportunities to partner with all these groups that may have programming or may have ideas, but they don't have the places. And you guys have the places. So I would just say, think out of the box and think of yourself as healthcare providers and how you can help solve this problem. So thank you very much.
So we have just about 5 minutes to take a few questions for Rob or Jason. Sure.
Jason, how is your project funded then? If you're like reaching out to North Dakota or South Dakota, or like you plan to reach with the Corps of Engineers or other agencies, or is it agency paying a fee for you, or is it just out of the gracious of your heart?
Great question. The question was how are we funded? In North Carolina, I have a very large grant from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina Foundation to install track trails in 75 locations over the next 3 years. As far as South Dakota said, hey, you're working with Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina Foundation, let's ask the South Dakota Health Department. And so the South Dakota Health Department graciously gave them $20,000 for their initial startup, which is going to be the first trail we put in and then the 6 more that we're currently working on. And then they since then have obtained another grant from them to do more parks after that. In terms of other places, we are a nonprofit, so we can write grants. So if you know of a grant in your community and you're like, oh, we really want this in our area, then you can ask us to help you write the grant. We can partner together to write the grant. It's a good way to get grants with partnerships. And it costs about $5,000 to install. So if you don't have a grant, then it would cost about $5,000 to get you a trailhead kiosk, which is a sign, the 4 brochure holders, 2,000 of 4 sets of brochures, so whichever 4 you chose, and then integration into the website, and then all the data collection that goes along with that, and all the reports that you would get from that. So, great question.
Robin's account of what she did at the Bipartisan Policy Center is remarkable, and what she did was remarkable. I wrote her afterwards that it was probably one of the most stimulating 3 hours I've spent in a meeting in the last 2 decades. It was extraordinary. You know, you had John Jarvis, the director of the Park Service, spent all day in these 2 sessions, and he said something that was very important. He said, we don't expect Americans to leave their technology at home when they come to national parks, which is really important because that hasn't been articulated publicly. We also had Eric Huey of the Software Alliance, who will be appearing in 2 weeks at the American Summit on National Parks, saying the same thing, which is mea culpa. Those of us who have been developing Grand Theft Auto and everything else have in fact contributed